earlier this week that idiot fucking Granholm told everyone that the best way to deal with the increase in gas prices is to go out and buy an electric vehicle. Okay, dipshit, but first you have to spend over $40,000 to get a fucking electric vehicle.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. All right, everybody, welcome to Freedom Friday. So a couple days ago, an electric vehicle company based out of California called Proterra filed for bankruptcy. And why is this important? Well, because Proterra is the company that the Biden administration basically helped to become the world's largest manufacturer of electric buses. So according to an article that I read in an online magazine called TechCrunch, Proterra has been around since 2004, and at the time it started as an electric transit bus company, and it raised like millions of dollars from all these high-profile backers. I think it was like $200 million or something like that. And then as of this month, right before declaring bankruptcy, the company had delivered more than 1,000 electric transit buses, including 199 new buses and 14 pre-owned buses. So let's back up a little bit here about this company. So Proterra in 2015 started to diversify, and they developed their own battery technology and powertrains. And so they broke off into like 3 different business lines. They had their transit unit, then they had their battery systems line called Powered, and then they had a charging infrastructure business called Energy. And they expanded beyond buses into cargo vans and off-high equipment used in construction. They installed more than 100 megawatts of electric vehicle charging infrastructure to support commercial vehicle fleets across North America. And so apparently with all this diversification, they bit off more than they could chew. And they ended up going public in 2021, which is when Biden started pushing for them as like the darling of the electric vehicle world. He was claiming Proterra was going to help the US own the future, and they were going to make 1,000 buses a year. And Proterra merged with a special purpose acquisitions company in a $1.6 billion deal. But then they burned through all their capital because they were trying to scale these 3 sections of the business at the same time. And they lost 77% of their market value since 2021, but they're still worth $362 million. So the company is claiming that their bankruptcy is the result of projects that were relying on federal and state funding, combined with inflation and contracts being signed 12 to 18 months before manufacturing began. So let's say a contract was signed in 2021, and the manufacturing costs were priced below what the actual cost of goods were 12 to 18 months later in 2022, and then they had supply chain constraints. So the question, though, is how does the Biden administration play into all this? Well, back in May of 2021, Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm served on Proterra's board of directors, and she held 240,000 shares in the company, which clearly was a conflict of interest. So she ended up selling $1.6 million worth of Proterra shares after she received all this criticism about ethics concerns. And then in February of 2023, the CEO of Proterra, Gareth Joyce, was appointed by Biden to serve on the president's export council. And on top of these shady dealings, Proterra stood to benefit from Biden's $1.2 billion infrastructure bill, the good old Inflation Reduction Act, because this included around $5 billion to replace all of the existing school bus fleets in the United States with fully electric or hybrid buses. And this was part of Biden's, zero emissions by 2030 plan. And on top of that, Proterra also received millions of dollars of aid from the United States government in COVID relief funds. So I want to play this clip from Jesse Waters on Wednesday because it kind of goes into this whole situation in detail.
Kamala Harris was in Philadelphia today talking about her most cherished thing.
Workers are building electric buses so people can get where they need to go.
What the vice president didn't tell you was America's biggest electric bus company just went belly up. The company's called Proterra, and it filed for bankruptcy this week. Proterra was Biden and Kamala's golden boy. It was the company that was supposed to eradicate diesel. Taxpayers were funding it, and now the money's gone. We don't know how many possible hundreds of millions of dollars we lost. We don't know where the money went. But we do know this bankrupt electric bus company had access to at least $8 billion. Democrats thought they picked a winner. Kamala toured their factory. Mayor Pete toured their factory. Even Biden touted it.
We ought to be the single most significant suppliers of electric buses and vehicles in the world. You guys are getting us in the game. It's going to make a lot of difference.
Well, now they're out of the game because the company was a scam. In California, the buses caught on fire. In Philly, they broke down. And in Alaska, the batteries froze in the cold. And in Minnesota, they stalled out on the hills. The wheels on the bus do not go round and round. And it takes a year to fix an electric bus because the parts are so rare. So why would the Democrats invest so much political capital and taxpayer capital in a broken electric bus company? Because it was a pump and dump scheme. Al Gore had millions invested in the company while he was lobbying the White House to herald it. George Soros had over 20 million invested in Proterra. Jennifer Granholm, Biden's energy secretary, sat on the company's board. She held stock in Proterra while she was secretary and then sold it for about $1.5 million. Joe Biden even put the Proterra CEO on a prestigious government board. And reports say Proterra insiders dumped their stock before the company went bankrupt. This was a political pump and dump. Cash out before the crash. Proterra stock is now worth 17 cents a share. This is like Solyndra.
Stephanie, tell me that's not totally fucking corrupt.
Yeah, it totally is. I thought that Kamala was going to start talking about yellow school buses again. I was like, oh no, don't do it. No, you know what this reminds me of is, okay, we know that during the COVID crisis, right? Like there was the biggest exchange of wealth or movement of wealth from all of us to the elite class. Well, remember like when COVID was kind of winding down and that undercover reporter had said, some guy at CNN had said like their next crisis that they're going to push is climate change. Well, again, we're seeing this huge exchange of wealth because what's happening is gas and energy and everything that, you know, the rest of us need and can't afford now, and inflation's crazy, is basically having everyone run through their savings and go into debt. Meanwhile, all of the rich, wealthy elite are getting deals like this. They're investing in companies like this, and it's all a bunch of bullshit. And the politicians and everyone has their hands in it. And it's just so crazy, especially when he says that Al Gore and George Soros have invested millions of dollars in the company. Those are the damn people pushing the climate agenda and, you know, have ties with like everything going on in the background. So the whole thing is shady through and through. And I think it proves again that like the green agenda has zero to do with the environment and everything to do with the elite lining their pockets by investing in these companies. And that is it. That is all they care about, is the money tied to it. It has nothing to do with saving our planet.
No. And you heard him mention Solyndra. And I don't know if you remember this, but there was this whole debacle with Solyndra back in 2009. And this is like fucking deja vu, because the Solyndra thing, Obama was pushing for the same green energy shit. And he dumped $535 million worth of taxpayer money into this solar panel company called Solyndra. And he did the exact same shit that Biden did with Proterra, visiting the factory, talking about how great it was going to be to have solar energy and how it was going to pave the way for a brighter and more prosperous future. And that was in April of 2010. And then by August of 2011, Solyndra went bankrupt and the American public lost $500,000. And then it was later revealed that Obama knew the company was going under, but he wanted to keep the whole green energy facade going. So he insisted that they don't lay off any of their employees until after the 2012 midterms. Like, talk about some shady shit, and how fascinating that that happened in August. And look, this is happening in August. So here we are again now with the Biden administration still consistently trying to convince Americans that we need electric vehicles. And I don't know if you saw this, Stephanie, but earlier this week, that idiot fucking Granholm told everyone that the best way to deal with the increase in gas prices is to go out and buy an electric vehicle. And she said, if you filled up your electric vehicle and you filled up your gas tank, you would save $60 per fill up by going electric rather than using gasoline. Okay, dipshit, but first you have to spend over $40,000 to get a fucking electric vehicle.
Right. And aren't they like 60,000 now?
Yeah, it depends which one you get, but
they're like insane if you can even get one. And then the other thing you have to consider too is the cost of the charging station that you have to install. And it's like, remember, I think we talked about this in a previous episode where people found a workaround where they could just tell the electrician to install a like the dryer outlet in the garage because it's like way cheaper than installing the electric vehicle outlet. Well, what happened is these people's houses burned down and the insurance wouldn't cover it because they didn't get the proper outlet. So it's like there's so many costs associated with that. And everyone is like, struggling to put food on the table. I don't think they can just go out and buy an electric vehicle. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And then the electric bill, like they keep saying that in the winter, it's going to be insane. And not to mention, we don't have the fucking infrastructure to support everyone getting an electric vehicle. Like how many times have we heard this now? And have they been warned that we cannot withstand it? Like the grid will fail. But they still keep pushing this. Like, I don't get it. So this is just asinine.
Yeah. And I remember last year, it was like May of 2022, and Pete Buttigieg, our wonderful transportation secretary, he was talking to a White House panel about how great electric vehicles are. And the panel was saying how people in rural areas aren't going to benefit from more federal spending on electric vehicles. And I looked this up in an Epic Times article from last year, and his reply was, quote, "It's actually the rural drivers who would benefit the most, because the more they drive, typically the more of their income's going to gas. So the more money they're going to save if they can afford an electric vehicle, which allows them to fill up on electrons." So I'm sorry, the 7 key words right there are, quote, "if they can afford an electric vehicle." And most people in the United States can't afford an electric vehicle. And I live in a rural area, and I can tell you straight up, I have never seen an electric vehicle charging station on the side of the road in the middle of hundreds of acres of nothing but like corn and wheat fields. Like these people are so fucking out of touch.
Oh, they have no clue what the average American is facing. And quite frankly, they don't care. They don't care. Like all they care about is lining their own pockets. And, like the other thing that Jesse Waters mentioned was like the danger around these. Like buses are burning in California, batteries are freezing in Alaska. They're breaking down and unable to make it up steep hills. And apparently it takes like a year to fix these things because the parts aren't readily available, which probably also means that it's incredibly expensive to fix them. And then it turns out too that this company Proterra, their cost of goods for the first quarter was $86.1 million, which was greater than its revenue. So like every single bus that it sells, they're losing money on. Like it just, the whole thing, like nothing adds up about this. So it's like all of these elites are investing in these companies, and there's probably a million of them. Like this is one example. There's probably so many examples of all the little batteries and parts that go into these vehicles that they're invested in. And that is what this whole thing is about. It's all just like a ruse that it's climate change. It has nothing to do with climate change. This is like the second wave of them transferring wealth, I'm convinced.
Yeah, and if you're on the fence and you still need convincing that switching the entire world over to electric vehicles isn't fucking dumb, here's more proof that electric vehicles are really not cost effective. So this company called the Anderson Economic Group, which is also known as AEG, they just released a study on August 1st, which basically indicated that cars using gasoline are cheaper to fuel than electric vehicles. And it basically summarized that mid-size, they call them ICEs, internal combustion engine vehicles, aka gas-powered vehicles, cost on average $11 to drive 100 miles as compared to electric vehicles, which cost anywhere from $12 to $16 to drive the same distance, depending on the charging modality. So this company did a study back in 2021, but they updated all of their variables for this year, including the change in gas prices, residential electricity prices, commercial charging prices, tax rates on fuel and electric vehicles, fuel economy, and allowance for travel to commercial charging stations. And according to the study, the cheapest priced gas-powered cars and crossover vehicles were the most economical to fuel at around $9.78 per 100 miles, as compared to the cheapest electric vehicle charged mostly at home, which were around $12.55 per 100 miles and $15.97 when using commercial charging stations. So that's on the cheap end. Then when you move into the mid-price gas-powered vehicles, they were still more affordable at $11.08 for 100 miles, compared to $12.62 for home charging electric vehicles and $16.10 for commercial charging. And you go into the pickup class, gas-powered trucks were less expensive than electric vehicles at $17.58 per 100 miles, and diesel trucks were even less expensive at $17.10 compared to $17.72 for at-home electric vehicle fueling. And get this, $26.38 for commercial electric vehicle fueling. So basically, having a diesel truck costs $9 less per 100 miles than charging an electric vehicle pickup at a commercial charging station. And the only category where electric vehicles were more economical than gas-powered or diesel vehicles was the luxury vehicle category. And that's the only category where charging electric vehicles at home was the most economical at $13.50 per 100 miles, compared to gas-powered luxury vehicles at $17.56. So basically, unless you own an incredibly expensive high-end electric vehicle, there are no actual savings or financial benefits to having one. So you combine that with all of the actual negative impacts that these vehicles have on the climate in terms of all the components that are needed to create them and the batteries that you can't seem to get rid of. And on top of that, people don't want fucking electric vehicles. There was a recent article in the Daily Caller that was talking about how Ford is shifting back to producing hybrids instead of full EVs because consumers aren't buying them and the company's losing money. And like, I know I've said this so many times that I've lost count, but anyone who thinks this administration is doing great things for the climate or for the American people, like, you are fucking delusional. And for those of you who think we just need to hang in there until 2024, but you're not speaking out against all this corrupt shit and you're not standing up for what's right, I'm sorry, but you are part of the fucking problem.
And it's causing the dollar to collapse. Like, literally cause, like, the BRICS, nations are meeting as we speak. Like, a lot of shit's happening with that. And it all boils down to this asinine plan, which once again goes back to these politicians lining their pockets. And I live in Florida, so like, it's super humid right now. You want to know what my electric bill was? It was almost $500.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So no, I don't want to plug in a vehicle and add to that cost. Like, I'm sorry. And then not even the cost, but like, remember when we did a climate change episode and we were talking about when you factor in the carbon emissions from manufacturing these vehicles, it is worse for the environment to manufacture an electric vehicle than to drive a gas guzzling fucking diesel truck. Like, it's not good any way you slice it. And so this is all just, again, it's like a ruse. It's, oh, climate change, you got to be, get your electric vehicle. It's good for the environment. Don't worry about the batteries that we can't recycle and are just going to like sit and land. And, don't worry about all of the cobalt and all these things that have to be mined by children illegally. Like, just do it. It's good for the environment. No, it's not. And I think more and more people are waking up and realizing it. And I think that's why Ford and these companies are seeing a decline, because people were buying it for a while, but now there's so much information out there that's completely debunked this bullshit. And I just don't think anyone that's awake is going to fall for it anymore.
I mean, I hope not. I really hope not. but people seriously need to start standing up for what's right.
I agree.
Friday.
You can tell this, for some reason, this topic I get so heated over because I know like the background of it, that it has nothing to do with our climate, our environment, saving the planet. It just drives me crazy. So hopefully that was enlightening for everyone listening. And we should do some digging and find out some of these other companies, because like I said, I'm sure there is a shit ton of them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Happy Freedom Friday, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here Monday. Thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.